Welcome. This is another episode of Cyber Coast to Coast. From the East Coast, Metuchen, New Jersey, I am Scott Schober, joined by my co-host.
Hey, this is Craig Schober from Long Beach on the West Coast. And we're coming back from a winter break. We closed down the business briefly. And, you know, stories in the news that circulate around cybersecurity and all kinds of issues seem to slow down, but they're starting to pick up again. So before we get into it, did you do anything fun over the winter break, Scott, with your family, or anything at all?
Yeah, I did a lot of relaxing, fires, split some wood, but the weather wasn't really that nice. It was kind of cold and dreary and foggy, so we really didn't get to do any lake activities because we were up at our cabin up there at the lake. And unfortunately, my dishwasher went. So I spent a good 2 days trying to fix the dishwasher with replacement parts that were incorrect, and it didn't work. And I finally, in the end of it, I bit the bullet and went out and bought a new dishwasher. So now I have expertise skills in removing dishwashers and reinstalling them, and had success there. So happy wife and clean dishes right now. So I guess I can't complain, but it was fun. I learned a lot about it, and no complaints there. Before we find out what you were doing over winter break, I want to mention that Cyber Coast to Coast is brought to you by Cyberlytica, providing proactive cybercrime intelligence. To learn more about Cyberlytica, visit www.cyberlytica.com. And we thank them very much for being our sponsor for Cyber Coast to Coast. So how was your winter break there, Craig? Did you guys get to relax a bit or do anything fun?
Yeah, it was almost too relaxed. We've had unseasonably cold and wet weather here in the past few weeks. So, we venture out rarely. But the past couple of days, the sun has shined again. So, and temperatures are picking up. So it's becoming same old Long Beach, West Southern California. So we're gonna be out and about soon enough, having fun. Hopefully, as long as we stay away from COVID and all the other scary things.
Yeah. And the weather here, they actually it dipped in temperature, probably dropped about a 20-30 degree, a little bit more normal than than it has been over the past week. And I guess southern half of New Jersey and all the states below really got pounded with some snow, and spots that got 6 inches plus. We were fortunate we didn't get anything, surprisingly, but we'll take that. Although at this time of year, usually by now we've had at least one good snowstorm, and a lot of the kids are upset as they're dealing with my kids are still in school with this whole COVID mess, as you mentioned there. But a lot of the schools in our area in New Jersey now switched over to virtual for 1 or 2 weeks in hopes that things settle down with the winter break and holiday time. Many families got together, and it's just spiking here, the COVID, this latest strain. And that's a pretty big concern. So hopefully everybody, all our listeners out there, are staying healthy and doing all the precautions that they should be doing, keeping that social distancing, wearing masks where they could, washing your hands frequently. I had the privilege of getting my booster over the break. So 2 days I was out for the count, as well as my wife feeling sick with all the side effects. But hopefully that will prevent us, if we do get this any strain of COVID, it will prevent us from getting hit really hard. So we'll see how that goes.
All right. Well, that segues us right into our first story about medical devices and ransomware attack risks. You brought this one to the table, Scott. Do you want to give us a little bit of background on it?
Yeah, absolutely. So this comes from the Hacker News, and a couple of years ago, there was several reports back in 2017, 2018 about medical devices and could they possibly be hacked. Now, this is kind of fast forwarding a couple of years later, talking about the subject again. And since then, in the past few years, medical devices actually have become more connected to the internet, and more devices are wireless. So therefore, there's more opportunity for hackers and cyber criminals to exploit those vulnerabilities there. And of course, using wireless as a conduit always, that's very, very common. But this particular spin is talking about ransomware attacks. And I find that interesting too, because a lot of the times when I'm talking about future hacks and cyber crime and predictions that we should look forward to, I talk about this. I say one of the areas that really concerns me is not just hacking medical devices, but where somebody's medical device now in the middle of a ransomware attack, and they say basically, "Hey, I'm going to shut you down, or I'm going to affect your your pacemaker if you don't pay this ransom." And they could speed it up or shut it off or do a lot of other things, monkeying with it that could basically kill someone. And it sounds very far-fetched and futuristic out of the movies, but it's here and it's now. And that's kind of what this article really kind of delved into, is how hospitals and medical care facilities are so interconnected with the internet, and that if ransomware attacks are targeting these facilities, it could put patients' lives at risk. There has been already a couple documented cases of people that have actually died as a result of cyber criminals targeting hospitals with ransomware attacks. And basically it shuts their computer networks down, and therefore they have to divert people. So if you get an ambulance that shows up at your home and you're having a heart attack and they're racing you to one facility, and suddenly they say, no, you got to go somewhere else. Now they got to drive 20 miles out of the way. You could die in the process. And that's exactly what happened. And that's what this article kind of deals with a little bit, talking about these hazards and vulnerabilities and with connected medical equipment. So I'm not sure if you've heard of any stories similar to that, but I've heard a few over the past 2 years. And I reflect back with a cybersecurity colleague and researcher, Tyler Cohn Woods. We were at RSA and we were presenting a keynote there talking about medical implants. And I remember vividly that after we discussed this, somebody actually came up to me and started mentioning they had several medical implants and some health conditions, and they were really concerned. Is this true, what you guys are talking about implants and the potential for being hacked in the future? So you could tell that the medical community does have concerns about this, and it's a real thing. So I'm glad this article was out, and it was good to see that, and a little bit more modern spin talking about that tied in with the ransomware attacks.
Yeah, and the article, present a lot of scary stuff. But the thing that scares me even more, in a way, are the second and third order effects. Now you have, ransomware gangs. They could theoretically, say, I'm going to shut off power to your pacemaker or whatever, those type of threats, and those are legitimate, but we haven't seen too many. Now, the ones we can't really document or prove are the probably tens of thousands of things that have happened that are almost seen as inconveniences. Our mother has been suffering from cancer for decades, and her hospital, she's been a regular patient there, getting treatments and all kinds of diagnoses for years and years. They had I don't know if it was a ransomware attack, but there was some kind of cyber attack. I know they lost her records, and as well as the records of other, hundreds or possibly thousands of patients. So she had to go and travel to a new place to get a scan, because they couldn't trust the old scans that they still had on record. So they wanted to see new scans to see how the cancer had progressed, and yada, 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 all that stuff. But my point is, she had to travel out of her way instead of using existing records during a time of COVID. So she could have been easily exposed to all these other things. There's just a lot of unintended consequences that come from a single attack that affect people who aren't even being targeted. They're just, second and third order effects. And you can't prove any of that. And that's what I think we're going to see a lot of, and not even know we're seeing it in the coming years.
Yeah, that's just a really good point. And I look at that, I kind of call it a disruptor. And those are the after effects of a cyber attack or a ransomware attack or a targeted attack. Those disruptors can sometimes be really inconvenient and annoying, not even to mention the cost, because obviously there's costs involved for people and taking new tests and who pays for insurance, this and that. Put aside that, because hopefully we don't focus on just the money side of things when it comes to healthcare and people's health. And I think we're all sensitized to this even more as a concern with the current strain of COVID going around, and being extra careful that we really don't get around other people and we minimize exposure. But even to going to doctors and hospitals, you don't want to go unless you have to. So now here, to your point, in the case where with our mom, she was kind of forced to go back into the medical arena again, and added those risks, which is not good. I mean, as it is now, she's getting regular weekly infusions and other tests and procedures. So she's seeing a lot of doctors, and she's constantly exposed to it. So anytime that anybody out there is pushed to be exposed even more to the medical community, there's concern there. So I do think going forward, if cyber criminals, they really should lay off that environment. But we know that the challenge is it's lucrative. They know that they can command a ransom. They can cause a lot of disruption. They can cause grief by targeting the healthcare sector and hospitals and doctors and things like that. And we the patients all suffer, unfortunately.
Yeah, maybe in the future they'll come up with something sort of like the Geneva Convention, no torturing of war prisoners, no ransomware of sick people in hospitals. Like let's create a baseline and not go below that,
Yeah.
Who knows? Maybe someday there'll be some kind of consensus on that, and we can all agree on at least that.
Yeah. It is crazy there. And what can you do about it? Well, to keep safe online, to keep your passwords safe, so you don't have your information sold on the dark web, so you're not victimized with ransomware attacks and other malware and things. It's really important that you are proactive. And I'll just put a little plug in there for our, Cyber Coast to Coast is made possible because of Cyberlytica. They're our sponsor for this segment here, and they're providing proactive cyber crime intelligence. To learn more about Cyberlytica, visit cyberlytica.com. And they do some great stuff there, keeping people safe, especially in the dark web, if our information is stolen and being sold there by cyber criminals.
Yeah.
And let's see, that cues us up for our next story here. And this was an interesting one. I've been talking to a lot of friends recently, and I think oftentimes when we think about the U.S. Postal Service, people kind of sigh because they get frustrated with letters not arriving and the endless cost of postage going up and up. It is kind of federally funded or subsidized to some extent to get things done. And it's pretty amazing that I could take a letter, write it right now, put it in the mailbox, put a 58-cent stamp on it in first class, and it'll go to the West Coast over to you. To get that done in, 3 to 5 days is pretty amazing. Doesn't always happen, but overall they're pretty good. I got to give them kudos there. However, they've been dealing with, and this is an ongoing challenge. I mean, technically, if you do the research, you go back into the late 1800s, and the postal system has been struggling with people trying to perform all kinds of scams. And this is what I call more of a scam than maybe a cyber attack. And what I'm referring to is counterfeit postage. I don't know if you heard about it much. Recently, especially with over the holiday time, people are mailing letters and postcards and sending things, of course, even through Amazon, through the postal system. There's been a lot of stories and articles about counterfeit postage. And one particular article that I really liked, did nice coverage on it, came from AARP, and it was entitled "Beware the Surge in Counterfeit Postage Stamps." And I came across this actually as I was doing some research, talking to some friends who actually purchased a number of rolls of stamps. And they were telling me about it. And they said, I got it for whatever, 23 cents. And I bought a couple per stamp, and I bought a couple rolls. Another person bought 1,000 stamps. And I was like, wow, we're paying, when we're doing mailings, we're using stamps.com, and we get a little bit of a discount. Stamps maybe 4 cents less than a traditional, if I walk in the post office, because we're buying it bulk and we're printing it out on a Dymo label. But still, if anybody else goes for a 1 ounce letter, it's going to cost you 58 cents to mail that first class. So if you buy a forever stamp. So when I'm hearing about rates, half of that, 50% off, my ears go up, because that's an expensive it's expensive to mail letters, to mail, whatever it is. It could be invoices, it could be letters, whatever. So this article, as I dug into it, it talks about how bad of a problem counterfeit stamps are. I did not realize it was this bad. The interesting part is if you go to the U.S. Postal Service and it's on their website and there's various articles that talk about it, they actually have some automated detection solutions that are in especially the major postal facilities that handle the mail if it's going out of state or something out of your town. If it's in your immediate town, it looks like they can handle that and deliver it without it having to go to another branch or another location. And they likely will not scan it to see if it's actually fraudulent or counterfeit stamps. And the way the scam seems to work is it's all coming out of China. When I started hunting down some of the specific web addresses for these companies, I saw that they're all registered in China. They're all reported on different scam websites, and they're all using the same e-commerce platform to accept either your PayPal information or your credit card and your personal information. And that's the part that really scared me. And that's where the danger is. If it seems too good to be true and you're getting postage at half price, guess what? It probably is a scam. It probably is counterfeit. In fact, it's almost certain to be. The part that I don't like is you're now giving away your personal information. You're giving away your credit card information. And in some of these sites, they have a level of legitimacy or credibility in that they will deliver the stamps. The problem is they're fake stamps. So they're printing them in the masses, millions and millions of stamps that cost fractions of a penny. They're stealing personal information from the consumer. And of course, they're stealing from the U.S. Postal Service, which is going to do what? It's really going to then affect all of us. It's going to affect their bottom line, which is just going to drive the price of stamps up yet more and more. So it's a concern, and people really need to kind of stop and ask themselves, is this legitimate? And need to think about it. And most of this, just so you know, it's advertised on Facebook and Etsy and all kinds of social media platforms. Again, because it's cheap, it's effective, it can get the word out to the masses. I started last night even reading some of the reviews on the different sites, and they were all positive 5-star reviews. And guess what? They were all fake reviews. And
Right.
and that's what I think also fools us. We're so used to the press the button, the quick buy from Amazon or wherever online, and we check the reviews. Oh, it's got 4 or 5-star reviews. This must be legitimate. It must be good. Guess what? Those are fake too.
Yeah. Now, if you go to so you're saying if you go to a Facebook marketplace
Mhm.
and they're saying, "Hey, we got we got a big package of stamps, half price," then it's what? It's redirecting you to another site, totally different site, unaffiliated
Correct.
with Facebook, and they're taking your credit card information.
Exactly. Yeah. So
Okay.
there's a redirect. So the advertising is done through Facebook, a marketplace, and Instagram, and Etsy, all different. And there's actually dozens of sites that are promoting and pushing it. But the interesting thing, it's also through through social media, in that people share. When people get a good deal and you
Mhm.
save $1, you want to tell someone about it. And that's what's starting to happen. I think the word of mouth kind of made this go even more viral. And that's how I was turned on to it. I was on a Zoom call with some colleagues and friends, and they were all discussing it and saying, "Hey, I just bought some stamps. I got a great price." And I'm sitting there thinking, geez, I never heard of this. How could this be so cheap? That's crazy. I said, what was the site again? And what was the site that you got it from? And then I'm jotting notes down. And then I started doing my research. And then I clearly realized these were counterfeit stamps. And that's the concern. And part of the ruse, I think, is important, that kind of leads you to believe maybe there's some credibility to this. Is, first of all, it's a forever stamp. I think the first forever stamp was back in 2007 or so. It was about 41 cents.
Mhm.
And part of the claim here is people that are stamp collectors and bought estates and this and that, they bought bulk stamps. Some people spent tons of money and they wanted to buy forever stamps, figuring they buy it and never have to buy them again because the price is just going to keep going up and up and up. So there's all these bulk forever stamps somebody bought at a very low price a long time ago. So some of the stamps even mention from 2017, 2018, the leftover bulk forever flag stamps and so on and so forth. That's the most common one, by the way. that's counterfeit is the flag stamp from 2017, 2018. And people start to think, well, it's not my favorite one. I'd rather get flowers or puppy dogs or something else. But hey, if it's that cheap, I'll save myself some bucks. And that's really how it works. They're printing them for fractions of a penny in China. They're selling them now to these various companies. And it's interesting, all the addresses, when I did the research, the physical address on the website for the e-commerce store, they're all in California. When I look up the physical address, in one case, I looked up the physical address and all it was a picture of the woods. Another one, it was a dumpy little house that looked like it was in the ghetto or something. So quickly you learn these are not businesses or e-commerce sites for the physical address. And a couple other tells on there. Each website looked exactly the same, just a different logo, slightly different address from down the block. And the phone number that they used said, do not call, text only. We only accept PayPal. We only accept your credit card. So to me, right away, I all these red flags were waving in the air for me. So I would never fill any personal information out. But I started to wonder, how do they test it? How do you know if it's fraudulent or not? And it's interesting. It's really hard to tell from the human eye. For you or I to look at it, they're going to look pretty close. The post office won't even reveal fully how they can detect legitimate versus fraudulent, but apparently it's a combination of things. You can use optical scanning super fast, and it's 100% auto detect if it's legit or if it's counterfeit. So they have machines that are doing this at high speed. Number one, they do have some watermarks in there in the actual stamp in a sub layer that you can't again see to your physical eye. So if you use short range UV light, you can actually put it over there and discern and see if there's certain letters and things. But it's really stamp collectors that have the expertise in identifying fraudulent versus legit stamps, because they collect it and that's their livelihood. So I was looking to that community to find out and get educated on it. And they have a wealth of information they shared over the past week with myself. I didn't find an actual device that could easily detect it and tell you. It still required some human interaction and, kind of AI with our brain to discern the differences there. You couldn't really tell from font or ink or anything else from what I could learn, but just the watermarks and using UV light, you could discern a little bit.
That's funny. All this talk about stamps and scams and all that brings me back to my college days in the 90s. This is before the forever stamps. This is probably before they were as sophisticated as they are now in terms of the post office and scanning. But I had a friend who was kind of a anarchist hacker guy, and I was one of our assignments in my video class was to make a PSA, public service announcement video for anything we want. And I said, hey, instead of doing something good, instead of doing a white hat PSA, I'm going to do a black hat PSA. So I made a series of videos showing how you can steal from a vending machine using the old you tape, dollar bill and tape thing. So it kind of goes in, pull it out kind of thing. And one of them was a how to reuse stamps that postage that have been mailed to you legally. And you steam off the stamp, and then you soak it in rubbing alcohol for a period of time, and it apparently it's going to remove the ultraviolet ink that the post office puts on it. So now you remove the marker saying that this was used postage, and if you peel it off properly and re-stick it on and it looks good and it goes through the scanning machines good, they're not going to see that mark. I never tested it, but according to his instructions, I created the video, and I think I got an A on that project anyway.
Hey, all right.
Regardless of the legality. So, it was the 90s. What are you gonna do?
You got to think like a scammer, think like a cyber criminal, which is sometimes how you get into their heads. And hopefully we can do some things that from an education standpoint and the tools we provide and other companies provide to combat some of these scammers out there. Because I think it's frustrating. And as usual, who do they tend to target? It's a huge amount of people on the Facebook community and a lot of the elderly. The older ones got duped and fooled out of this because they they're trying to save a buck, which is fine, but they didn't have maybe the tech savvy ability to dive in and check out how legitimate it is or not. But I always caution people, regardless of what it is you're buying, whether it's on Amazon, eBay, even at the U.S. Postal System online website, if it seems too good to be true, if it's too much of a price savings for anything, stop. It just all the red flags should go up, and you need to do your due diligence and ask the questions, do a little bit of research. In this case, within about 30 seconds, my skepticism and doubt revealed a whole slew of information that told me that this is clearly counterfeit and a scam. So just good things to keep in mind. And what happens, I think, unfortunately, when your personal information is compromised, if you were a victim of buying these counterfeit stamps, your personal information and what they do request is not just your address, but they wanted your mobile phone number in all cases, your email, and your credit card. Where does that all end up? Again, ends up on the dark web there. So very important that from time to time you do scan the dark web and make sure that your personal information is not on there, or else you will be a victim. And it may not happen today, but it may happen a week from now, a month from now, or later in the year. So really important to be careful, be proactive.
And speaking of the dark web, I'm sure our listeners know that Cyberlytica is always looking at the dark web. I mean, it's their job. And this episode is brought to you by Cyberlytica. They provide proactive cybercrime intelligence. So I urge anyone that's interested in the dark web, you don't necessarily have to, pay for their services, but you could see all the things that the dark web offers, both white hats and black hats, and the law enforcement, and everyone's looking at it because there's a lot you can learn from there. So visit cyberlytica.com and see, how they look at the dark web, and can get all that data on all of us, because it's all out there.
It is.
And that brings us to our final story. We went from kind of postage scams, and this was a scam on some individuals too, but it's much bigger than that, and it seems like it's a much bigger problem, and it's ongoing. And I know of this story because I follow. We both do.
Yeah,
we're both Apple people. We follow Apple News, Apple products, and I know the NSO spyware story because Apple is currently in a lawsuit against NSO, because NSO is one of the few. They might be the only. There was Celebrite. They had their day in the sun, but now anytime you hear about an iPhone getting hacked, which is not supposed to be able to happen when you're running the current OS, it should be the most secure thing. But we still hear about these NSO spyware hacks, and Apple is in a lawsuit saying, hey, you're enabling users and state actors to infiltrate our security system, and that's illegal and dangerous and all these things.
Mm-hmm.
But what's this story? This story is involves Netanyahu and Poland spyware. And what went on here? Is this something we need to worry about, or is this something only high government officials have to keep a watch for?
I think it's something that consumers need to be concerned with, because again, it gets back to the root of the problem of privacy and overstepping that line. And you mentioned before Cellbrite, and Cellbrite was instrumental in numerous cases, Apple working with FBI and law enforcement in unlocking iPhones. Traditionally, if you go to any phone store right now, you go to Verizon store, you're going to find a Cellbrite box or multiple boxes in the back there. And that's often used to download the content super fast and securely without anybody being able to see what's on your actual phone, your contacts, your personal information, and migrating that over to the other phone. Some of those things have obviously changed in the world now, because we could back up our own phones on a computer. We could do it in the cloud. So some of that has certainly changed. And now you've got a company here, NSO, and both Cellbrite and NSO, I believe, are both headquartered, I should say, out of Israel, but they have other U.S. divisions and other locations as well, because they're larger organizations. But in this particular case, the NSO group has this Pegasus spyware software, and it is tied in with Poland's leader. And they had, a meeting with the Israeli, or I should say, the former Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu from the past. They had dealings with, and now suddenly they're tied into the Polish government here, and they look back and they say, oh, wait a second. They obtained this Pegasus software, which allows you to do many things, get into an iPhone, take over it, look at, if you target a particular iPhone, and not only just location, where is this iPhone, but really looking at the data. We always talk about metadata in past episodes, data about data, but this is actually personal information that's private, that you really shouldn't have access to. Maybe it's your call history, chats that you had back and forth, texts, images, all that different type of information that could be on an iPhone, that this software allows somebody to actually pull off. So it's true spyware that it crosses that line. And I think when you involve now the Polish government, and you involve an Israeli company, you ask yourself the natural question, what could this be used for in other countries for spying? And unfortunately, they obtained it illegally. And that's really what the crux of the story was bringing out here. And I-24 News, I'm very familiar with. It's actually, it's the I-24 News, I guess, an Israeli station, but it's here in America, and they have an American branch. So I've been on that station many times, and they have some great information there. But they were kind of breaking the story here and sharing kind of this new wrinkle, because Pegasus software, spyware, NSO group, it's been out for a while. It's been a threat, and it is a real threat. But now we're understanding, now it's targeting specific governments, and that they've obtained them illegally, that software, and they're using it. That's where I think this adds yet another layer to the onion as it's being unraveled.
Yeah, we mentioned Cellbrite, and as I recall, the first time I heard of them was right after the San Bernardino terrorist stuff. Remember, it was
Yes.
Apple and the FBI. There was kind of a standoff, and I think Cellbrite, that Israeli company, they used it to kind of say, "Hey, we offer an alternative. Law enforcement, you can plug your seized iPhones and Android phones into our black box, and we'll pull off the information for you." But this goes one step further. This Pegasus software by NSO, right? Because you don't even have to have direct physical access to the phone. Once you've installed that software or malware or whatever you want to call it onto the device, remotely, by the way, you can do that. Now you can remotely spy on the user in real time with conversations, text messages, all that stuff. That part is very worrisome, and I can see why lawsuits are being filed. I heard that NSO, I believe they were a publicly traded company, and I think they still are, but I heard their stock is just completely tanked,
struggling. Yeah,
because they're just, at this point, they don't seem to give out the vibe that they're trying to do good. They almost seem like a criminal organization, because it's getting hard. They're skirting that line. It's getting hard to see what benefit they bring to society. And I think investors are taking note and punishing them as a result.
Yeah. And I think if you look at a lot of these companies that provide a level of, let's call it, surveillance and applications, hardware and software, oftentimes a company provides this, they'll sell it to a lawful agency that's doing work for the US government or another government, but they're doing it lawfully. In other words, they're getting the proper documents in order. It might be Title III, it might be a judge order, or certain things have to be done by procedure, and legalities have to be met for them to install it and use it for a very said specific task. They can't just go out there and arbitrarily spy on anybody and look at anybody's phones and pull content indiscriminately, because that obviously is a violation of a lot of laws and privacy and others. So, and what we're seeing here is when we hear about that this software has been purchased and it's being used illegally and not following the proper boundaries, it makes one wonder how many other government agencies are doing this, how many other people are utilizing some of this to spy on people, to spy on different targets. And that's what I think is the unknown. A lot of this, honestly, I think opened up as a result, and you could say good or you could say bad based upon the past, but look what happened with the revelations from Edward Snowden a number of years back. When we look at that, I think it opened all of our eyes, really not just people in the US, but people globally, to how much surveillance is going on, how many agencies and groups might step over the line or attempted to step over the line and not follow the laws that are in place to protect people and in the name of national security.
Yeah, mass surveillance. We're going to keep an eye on it. It's going to keep on. It will keep popping up in the news.
Yeah.
And I guess as we kind of close the show, wanted to check with you and see what your what I missed over, because you've been holding out. You said you were doing a dishwasher and it was, the weather wasn't great during the break, but you did a few interviews too over the break, didn't you?
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. I never get to really truly relax or rest per se. I did a number of interviews for specific magazines where they wanted me to weigh in on different topics and things, but I did sounds like, I believe it's 3 different interviews. I just did one recently with ABC 27 out of Pennsylvania, which was kind of an interesting one. And that was a cool story, because what they were doing is an investigative piece about Pennsylvania and the unemployment and other things, where you go onto their online system and file information. And that obviously, when it's unemployment or salary, there's social security numbers, there's personal information galore that you need to keep protected. Well, the problem with this is you could access it with just basic login information, and they didn't require any type of multi-factor, 2-factor authentication. And again, my paranoia goes up right away, and certainly through the interview, I share that there's a concern that could be there, and they didn't implement it. And this is to replace an antiquated system that was deemed insecure and was being hacked. And already the new system has been targeted and hacked, and they weren't using multi-factor authentication. And it wasn't a single site that you logged in. It was connecting all the different, there was at least 6 different portals that were all interconnected that you could get into and now hop over to the other ones. And there was nothing there to really validate. And it allowed a hacker or cyber criminal to get in there if they just had basic login information and simply change a target account if a wire transfer was going to be performed or other things like that. So there was a lot of concerns. And I know during the investigative piece, they did reach out to the state for comment and say, how could this happen? How could they release this before properly testing and securing it? And there wasn't a whole lot of response, but that was one story that was kind of interesting. Another show, this was on RT television, Boom or Bust, that I did a segment, and that talked a lot about the concerns for online shopping, because obviously over the winter break, there's a lot of people that are doing online shopping, and especially Amazon and all the different retailers there, that's probably where they get 30 to 40% of their revenue now, is the online shopping that just happens December into early January. So there was a lot of concerns for people getting scammed of all different types. So I shared some information on that. And the other one was NTD Television, which is an interesting, more of an online, but I actually get it up north on DirecTV as well as a cable channel. And that was an interesting story about the new Spider-Man movie. I don't know if you saw it yet. But what they found out was happening is somebody got their hands on a pre-release of it, and they were distributing. And it was interesting. They used the Spider-Man movie as a vehicle to dispense malware. And this particular type of malware was for crypto mining. So what was happening is that people would get an illicit copy of Spider-Man movie before it's out in the theaters, and they didn't want to drop $20 to go see it. So they're watching it. They download it on their computer. When they download the movie, it secretly puts that malware on their computer. And in the background, when you're not using your computer, it will actually access your CPU, GPU, and steal your computing power to mine cryptocurrency. In this particular case, it was Monero that was being mined, and it's often used in the gaming community. And they're stealing not just your computing power, but ultimately, when you go back, you look at your electric bill, and guess what? Your computer is smoking hot because it's just crunching the numbers there, trying to mine the latest cryptocurrency. So it was kind of an interesting story because it played, and you almost can't blame the cyber criminals, even though they're doing something wrong and illegal. They're using a vehicle where somebody's being dishonest and not buying the movie or renting the movie. So it kind of allows them to maybe ease their conscience a little. They're saying, hey, these guys are stealing copies of Spider-Man anyway. I'm going to take advantage and steal their electric to make me some Bitcoin and make me some Moderno. And
it's like a honey. Yeah, it's like a honeypot for cyber criminals by cyber criminals.
Yeah. So I had fun with that interview. It was because it was kind of different. It was interesting. And a lot of times we have to think outside the box. And that's really what cyber criminals are doing. They're very clever in trying to come up with new means to scam us, to steal our money, to hijack our computers. And that's really looking forward to 2022. I think what's happening as we up our game and improve on different tactics to counter the cyber criminals, they're going to go back to the drawing board and use technology and use creativity and use innovation to find new ways to steal our money, to steal our personal information. So it's kind of guaranteed job security forever. I think we're going to be fine. We don't have to worry about this because there's always going to be a need for cybersecurity education, for hardware tools to combat these cyber criminals. And we just have to keep up with educating people and finding out what the latest scam is and what the latest thing they're doing so we can stay, hopefully, one step ahead of them.
Good stuff. Just our last reminder before we sign off that this episode of Cyber Coast to Coast is brought to you by Cyberlytica, providing proactive cybercrime intelligence. Learn more about Cyberlytica at their website, www.cyberlytica.com. And I guess we'll be talking soon, and our audience will be hearing us soon. Please keep subscribing, send your questions and comments because we will answer them on air. Signing off from Long Beach, California, this is Craig Schober.
Yeah, and I just want to add to that. Feel free, if you enjoy these episodes, please give us a rating. Also, give us your honest feedback there. We'd love to hear what you like and even future topics. So hopefully we'll talk some more. And again, this is Cyber Coast to Coast, and signing off from the East Coast. I'm Scott Schober, your host. Again, thank you so much there, Craig, from the West Coast. We'll be talking to you guys next week.